The heart of New York City pulsed with energy, its towering skyscrapers glowing against the night sky. Inside the elite L'On Royale restaurant, chandeliers sparkled above crisp white tablecloths, and the soft hum of conversation filled the air. This was where the rich dined, where fortunes were made over 5-course meals, and where power shifted with a simple handshake. Jaden Carter, just 13 years old, wasn't here to dine. He was a busboy, one of the many unseen workers moving through the restaurant like shadows, clearing plates and refilling glasses for patrons who barely acknowledged him. He worked long hours to help pay for his mother's hospital bills, his small hands rough from constant scrubbing. The job was grueling, but quitting wasn't an option. Most nights were the same. Endless orders, harsh whispers from waiters demanding speed, and the ever-present glare of Rick Wallace, the restaurant's ruthless owner. Wallace thrived on intimidation, reminding Jaden at every opportunity that he was disposable. "Move faster, Carter! You're not here to daydream," he snapped as Jaden hurried past with a tray of empty plates. Jaden bit back a response. Talking back meant risking his job, and right now, his family couldn't afford that. Still, despite the daily humiliation, Jaden kept his focus. Every plate he cleared brought him closer to another paid bill, another chance for his mother to get the treatment she needed. He pushed through exhaustion and frustration, determined to endure. Then everything changed in an instant. The restaurant was packed, the air thick with the scent of truffle butter and aged wine. Jaden moved carefully, balancing a tray of expensive crystal glasses. As he reached for another plate, his elbow brushed against a full wine bottle, sending it tumbling off the table. The bottle shattered against the floor, deep red liquid spreading across the pristine marble tiles. Conversations halted, eyes turned, and an eerie silence settled over the room. Rick Wallace stormed over, his expression thunderous. "Do you have any idea how much that bottle cost?" he hissed through clenched teeth. Jaden's breath hitched. I'm sorry, sir. It was an accident." Wallace grabbed his arm roughly, his fingers digging into Jaden's sleeve. "Clean it up. Now. And if you break one more thing, you're done. Have you ever had a bad day that turned into something unexpected? Share your story. Where are you watching from, and what time is it?" The L'On Royale buzzed with energy, every table occupied by high-profile guests, their conversations weaving through the air like a symphony of power and influence. Among them was Eleanor Harrington, a billionaire businesswoman whose name carried weight in every financial district across the country. Jaden Carter moved swiftly, clearing plates and refilling glasses, his presence unnoticed by most. He had learned to work in silence, to make himself invisible in a room full of people who barely acknowledged his existence. Tonight was no different, until disaster struck. As he hurried to clear a table near the center of the restaurant, his foot caught on the edge of a chair. He barely had time to react before the tray in his hands tilted forward, and in a split second, steaming hot lobster bisque poured down onto Mrs. Harrington's lap. Gasps filled the room. Silverware clattered against porcelain as heads turned toward the commotion. Jaden's heart stopped. The rich red soup stained her expensive silk dress, dripping onto the gold-trimmed chair beneath her. The air in the room shifted from indulgence to horror in an instant. Rick Wallace stormed over, his face contorted with fury. "You worthless brat! Do you have any idea who you just spilled that on?" His voice cut through the air like a whip, drawing even more attention. "Get out before I—" But before he could finish his sentence, Mrs. Harrington raised a trembling hand, stopping him mid-rant. Jaden stepped back, his breath shallow as he watched her. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her fingers gripping the table's edge for support. A strange look crossed her face, one of discomfort, then panic. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She was breathing heavily, her pupils dilating. Then, as if in slow motion, her body swayed. Murmurs spread through the dining hall. People whispered, glancing between Mrs. Harrington and the horrified staff. Some guests pushed their chairs back, standing hesitantly, unsure whether to intervene. Jaden's hands trembled as he took a step closer. "Ma'am, are you okay?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Mrs. Harrington's breathing became labored, her grip on the table tightening before her fingers slipped away. She clutched at her chest, a strained gasp escaping her lips. Then, before anyone could react, another crash rang out from the kitchen. A waiter collapsed to the floor, knocking over a stack of plates as he clutched his stomach. Jaden's skin prickled with unease. The same soup. Rick Wallace hesitated, his anger momentarily replaced by confusion. The kitchen door swung open, revealing another chef doubled over near the stove, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. What would you have done in Jaden's situation? Let's discuss. Chaos erupted inside the Lawn Royale as paramedics stormed through the grand dining hall, their movements swift and urgent. High-profile guests stood frozen in shock, their faces pale as the once exclusive restaurant turned into a crime scene. The murmur of luxury and power had been replaced by frantic whispers and the wailing of sirens just beyond the frosted glass doors. Jaden Carter stood motionless near the table, his heart pounding in his chest. He watched as paramedics carefully lifted Eleanor Harrington onto a stretcher, an oxygen mask pressed against her face. Her eyes fluttered open, her breathing shallow but steady. The heavy double doors swung open again, and this time uniformed officers flooded in. They wasted no time sealing off the restaurant, barking orders for everyone to remain where they were. The golden glow of the chandeliers above did little to ease the tension that now gripped the room. Jaden felt a knot tighten in his stomach as a detective stepped forward, speaking into his radio. "We need immediate toxicology on the lobster bisque. Repeat, suspected poisoning." A stunned silence settled over the guests. Rick Wallace, the restaurant owner, turned ghostly pale. "Poisoning? That's impossible," he protested. "Our kitchen staff is the best in the city." The detective ignored him, turning his attention toward the unconscious waiter being wheeled out on a stretcher. "He collapsed after eating the same dish, didn't he?" he asked one of the paramedics. "Yes, sir. Both victims showed similar symptoms," the medic confirmed. Jaden felt his breath catch, the same soup. Eleanor Harrington stirred, her voice hoarse as she removed her oxygen mask. "If not for this boy, I'd be dead," she murmured, her gaze locking onto Jaden. Gasps rippled through the room. Jaden shrank slightly under the weight of the attention, his mind still struggling to process the enormity of what had just happened. A slow realization settled over him. His accident hadn't just saved Mrs. Harrington's life. It had uncovered a crime. Detectives immediately turned their focus to the restaurant staff, demanding statements. Employees were lined up near the bar, their expressions ranging from fear to confusion. Jaden stood off to the side, his pulse still racing. Rick Wallace, his face red with fury, whirled toward Jaden. "You little brat, you ruined my restaurant's reputation," he spat. "None of this would have happened if he hadn't spilled the soup?" Mrs. Harrington cut in sharply, her voice regaining its strength. "Then I would have died at your table. Is that what you're suggesting?" Wallace's mouth snapped shut, his jaw tightening. He knew he was trapped. Jaden swallowed hard, realizing something chilling. Someone inside Lawn Royale had wanted Eleanor Harrington dead, and now they knew she wasn't their only target. The restaurant, once a place of wealth and indulgence, was now at the center of a crime that no one had seen coming. Jaden had just uncovered a deadly conspiracy, and he wasn't sure if that made him lucky or the next target. Do you think Jaden was in the right place at the right time? Or was it fate? Let's talk. The morning after the chaos at Lawn Royale, Jaden Carter awoke to a sight he never expected. Parked outside his rundown apartment building was a black Rolls-Royce, its polished surface reflecting the early sunlight. It looked completely out of place against the cracked pavement and weathered brick exterior of his home. Jaden rubbed his eyes, convinced he was still dreaming. But when he stepped onto the front stoop, reality hit. A sharply dressed driver in a black suit and dark sunglasses stood by the car, holding a sleek white envelope. "Jaden Carter?" the man asked, his voice smooth and professional. Jaden hesitated before nodding. The driver extended the envelope toward him. "Mrs. Harrington requests your presence." Jaden's fingers trembled slightly as he took the envelope, his pulse quickening. He glanced at the driver, but the man offered no further explanation. Jaden swallowed hard, stepping back into the apartment and shutting the door before carefully peeling open the envelope. Inside, his breath caught. A check, crisp, pristine, and impossible to ignore. The amount written in flawless ink? $50,000. His knees nearly buckled. A folded note was tucked inside beside the check. He unfolded it slowly, scanning the words written in elegant, deliberate strokes. "You saved my life, Jaden. Now, let's see what I can do for yours." Jaden swallowed, staring at the message. The words carried weight, more than just gratitude. It felt like an invitation to something far greater, something he couldn't quite understand yet. The driver remained outside, waiting. Jaden's mind raced. Was this real? Or was he stepping into something he couldn't escape? He glanced around the small apartment, the peeling wallpaper, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, his mother's worn-out shoes by the door. $50,000 could change everything. But something about this felt too easy, too perfect. His mother's weary voice called from the other room, snapping him from his thoughts. "Jaden? What's going on?" He hesitated before folding the check and note back into the envelope. "Nothing, Mom," he replied, forcing his voice to stay steady. "Just some work stuff." The weight of the decision pressed on him. He walked to the window and peeked out at the black Rolls-Royce. The driver hadn't moved, standing like a statue waiting for him to make a choice. Was he being rewarded or recruited? His hands tightened around the note. He had a choice to make. His heart pounded in his chest as he turned the envelope over in his hands. Was this a lifeline or a trap? Jaden hesitated, the weight of the envelope pressing against his palm. Was this the opportunity of a lifetime, or the start of something far more dangerous? Jaden Carter sat in the back of the Rolls-Royce, the hum of the engine barely audible over the thoughts racing through his mind. The city blurred past, towering skyscrapers reflecting the morning sun as the car weaved effortlessly through traffic. He clutched the envelope in his lap, fingers tightening around its edges. $50,000. An invitation. A life-changing decision. The car slowed in front of a massive glass tower, its entrance flanked by uniformed doormen who stepped aside as the driver opened Jaden's door. He hesitated for only a moment before stepping out, his sneakers scuffing against the pristine marble steps. The building loomed above him, intimidating yet alluring. Inside, the lobby was a world away from the one he knew, sleek, Polished floors stretched endlessly, and gold accents glowed under the chandelier's soft light. The air smelled of fresh orchids and expensive cologne. Jaden had never felt so out of place. A private elevator whisked him to the penthouse. The doors slid open, revealing a space so vast it barely resembled an apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, the skyline stretching beyond the horizon. Luxurious furniture, fine art, and towering bookshelves filled the room, yet it felt eerily quiet. Eleanor Harrington sat at the head of a long glass table, her posture regal, her expression unreadable. The woman he had saved looked entirely different now. Dressed in a tailored suit, the weakness from the night before replaced with sharp control. She gestured for him to sit. "Jaden," she said, her voice smooth but firm, "I imagine you have a lot of questions." He nodded slowly, still gripping the envelope. "Why am I here?" She studied him for a moment before leaning forward. "Because I see something in you, instinct, courage, and I need people I can trust." Jaden frowned. "Trust? For what?" Eleanor tapped her fingers against the table. "The world I live in, Jaden, is built on power, and power is a fragile thing. Someone inside Lawn Royale tried to kill me. I need to find out who and why." Jaden's pulse quickened. "You think someone poisoned you on purpose?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't think, Jaden. I know, and I believe you were in the right place at the right time. But fate doesn't interest me. People do." Jaden glanced at the cityscape beyond the windows, his mind spinning. He thought of his mother, of the eviction notices, of nights spent wondering how they'd get through another month. $50,000 could change their lives. But this wasn't just about money anymore. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, watching him closely. "Work for me, Jaden. Help me uncover the truth. I can offer you more than money. I can offer you a way out." The words lingered between them. A way out. Away from struggling, away from scraping by. But he wasn't naive. The kind of power Eleanor Harrington wielded came with a price. "I don't know anything about your world," he admitted. She smiled faintly. "Then let me teach you." Jaden exhaled slowly. He had spent his life being overlooked. Now, for the first time, someone was seeing him. But was he ready for what came next? The decision wasn't easy. One path meant walking away, back to the life he knew. The other meant stepping into a world where trust was fragile and power had consequences. He had to choose. Jaden Carter sat across from Eleanor Harrington, his mind still reeling from the offer she had placed before him. He had spent his entire life struggling to survive. And now, in a matter of hours, he had been thrust into a world he had only seen from the outside. But he wasn't naive. Power came with a price, and he was about to find out just how steep that price could be. "I'll do it," Jaden said finally, his voice steady despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. "I'll help you." Eleanor nodded, a satisfied glint in her eyes. "Good. But understand this, Jaden. Once you step into my world, there's no going back." Jaden already knew that. His first task was simple on the surface. Find out who had tried to kill Mrs. Harrington. But the deeper he dug, the more tangled the web became. It wasn't just about one poisoned bowl of soup. It was about power, who had it, who wanted it, and who would do anything to keep it. He started at Lawn Royale, blending in as just another worker while keeping his ears open. The restaurant wasn't just a place for the wealthy to dine, it was a front for something much bigger. Conversations behind closed doors spoke of hidden deals, whispered threats, and alliances that could crumble with a single misstep. Rick Wallace, the owner, wasn't just a cruel businessman. He was a man with connections, and those connections ran deep. He had enemies, but he also had people willing to do his dirty work. Jaden overheard snippets of conversations, coded language exchanged between staff members who weren't just there to serve food. And then there were the files. Late one night, when the restaurant had emptied, Jaden slipped into Wallace's office. The room smelled of expensive cigars, the desk cluttered with papers, but it was the locked drawer that caught his attention. With careful hands, he pried it open and found a stack of documents, bank transfers, offshore accounts, and a list of names. Some he recognized from the restaurant's guest list. Others he didn't. But one thing was clear. These weren't just business dealings. This was something much more dangerous. His breath hitched as he spotted a name near the top, Eleanor Harrington. Next to it, a date. The same night of the poisoning, someone had ordered the hit, and Wallace had known about it. Jaden's heart pounded as he closed the drawer, his mind racing. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. This was about survival. The deeper he went, the more he realized. He wasn't just a kid anymore. He was a player in a game where losing wasn't an option. And he had just made his first move. Jaden Carter stood at the edge of something far greater than himself. Just days ago, he was nothing more than a busboy, struggling to make ends meet. Now he was entangled in a web of power, secrets, and danger that stretched far beyond the walls of L'On Royale. He had saved a life, but at what cost? There was no turning back. Eleanor Harrington had given him an opportunity, but she had also locked him into a world where every choice carried consequences. The truth he had uncovered about Rick Wallace, the restaurant, and the attempted poisoning had shattered any illusion of safety. He wasn't a bystander anymore. He was in the middle of something far bigger, and walking away was no longer an option. Jaden stared at the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Eleanor's penthouse, the glow of the city casting long shadows across the sleek interior. The luxury around him felt surreal, like stepping into a life that didn't belong to him. Yet, deep inside, something told him he had never been more in the right place. "You've done well," Eleanor said from behind him, her voice calm but measured. "But this is only the beginning. You understand that, don't you?" Jaden exhaled slowly, his mind racing with everything he had seen, everything he had learned. "I never asked for this," he admitted, his voice quiet but firm. "But maybe this is where I belong." Eleanor studied him carefully, nodding as if she had expected that answer. "Power doesn't just find people, Jaden. It chooses them. You've already proven you have instincts. The question is, what will you do with them?" Jaden thought of his mother, of the life they had lived before this. Struggle had been their reality for as long as he could remember. He had spent years being invisible, trying to get by in a world that never made room for him. But now, things were different. He had been given a seat at the table. The problem was, he wasn't sure if he was ready for the price that came with it. "If I stay in this, I need to know the truth about everything," Jaden said, turning to face her. "No more secrets." A small smile played on Eleanor's lips. "Fair enough, but be careful what you ask for. The truth isn't always easy to live with." Jaden clenched his fists at his sides, bracing himself. He knew that whatever came next would change him. The choices he made from here on out would define him. He had been a boy struggling to survive, but now he was stepping into a world where survival meant more than just making it to the next day. It meant power, control, and danger. As he looked back out at the city, he realized something. He wasn't afraid anymore. He was ready. His future had already been rewritten, and this was just the beginning.